Okay, let's just jump right in. Imagine for a second a hypothesis that tries to connect ancient folk medicine, undercooked pork, and modern oncology, all into one giant, intricate biological system. Today, we're unpacking a highly unconventional theory from our source material that completely flips how we view disease and how it's been treated throughout history.
The source asks a pretty wild question. Could the actual verbal spells muttered by village healers, say 150 years ago, hold the key to understanding devastating modern diseases? We're talking things like cancer and lupus. I know, it sounds a lot like magic, but this framework argues that there's actually a deeply misunderstood biological mechanism at play here.
To make sense of this alternative medical universe, we are going to break it down into 5 key areas: the core theory, transmission, bacterial mutations, historical treatments, and finally, a modern critique. Let's get to it.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the core theory. So, according to the source, ancient folk healing spells didn't just speak generally about illness. Actually, they specifically categorized up to 12 different types or mutations of the erysipelas streptococcus bacteria. And the crazy part? This was way before the microscope was even invented.
Now, modern medicine usually views erysipelas mostly as just a red external skin infection, but this hypothesis, it claims the bacteria is highly mutable. The idea is that it originates in pigs, but when it enters humans, it mutates internally into these invisible forms that basically wreak systemic havoc on the body.
Moving right along to Section 2, transmission and triggers.
So how does this pathogen actually work? The speaker outlines a very specific life cycle. It starts with consumption, eating infected, undercooked pork, or even inheriting it maternally. But here's the kicker. It doesn't attack immediately. It enters a dormant phase, just waiting peacefully in the body until a sudden stressor hits the immune system. That trigger is what causes it to rapidly mutate into a severe disease.
And what brilliantly illustrates the eclectic nature of this theory is the list of triggers. I mean, it's everything from UV light and chemical carcinogens to something as simple as a cold draft or sleeping on damp earth. But the most fascinating one? Emotional distress or ridicule, what village healers used to call the evil eye. The idea is that deep emotional stress supposedly lowers the body's defenses just enough for that dormant bacteria to finally strike.
That brings us to Section 3, mutations of streptococcus. Let's look at how these mysterious folk ailments translate into modern terms.
The source methodically maps out these terms. It argues that when a healer 150 years ago treated black erysipelas triggered by a severe sunburn, they were actually treating what we now call melanoma, a painful lump diagnosed as bone erysipelas. That was bone sarcoma. Dry erysipelas correlates to multiple sclerosis, and the catch-all invisible erysipelas supposedly covered various hidden internal cancers. It's like a linguistic puzzle.
To further back this taxonomy up, the speaker asks us to look at the physical symptoms of swine erysipelas right alongside human lupus. Both feature profound joint issues, heart damage, and systemic inflammation. So the hypothesis concludes that they are so perfectly identical, human lupus absolutely must simply be an internal mutation of that exact same pig bacteria.
Okay, Section 4, treatments, spells, and vaccines.
Before modern antibiotics, traditional healers supposedly treated these severe conditions without any surgery. For something like bone erysipelas, a healer might place a red cloth over the lump, perform a burning ritual, and recite specific spells. The theory posits that these spells weren't just magic. They acted as a psychological broad-spectrum treatment targeting all the invisible variations of the streptococcus that the healer couldn't physically see.
Let's look at a timeline to see how this builds into early modern medicine. We move from folk healers using spells 150 years ago to the pioneering vaccine work of Dr. William Coley in the late 1800s, right up to the abandoned research of the present day. So, Dr. William Coley famously created an early cancer vaccine using bacteria. But why did it work? Well, according to this framework, he was unknowingly injecting patients with a stronger external red erysipelas. This provoked a massive fever, a huge immunity boost, and that stronger bacteria actively hunted down and outcompeted the weaker, mutated internal cancer-causing erysipelas, literally fighting fire with fire.
And finally, Section 5, critique of modern medicine. The source uses this entire framework to launch a pretty passionate critique. The belief here is that modern oncology is entirely on the wrong path. They argue that billions of dollars and decades of time are being wasted hunting for isolated cancer genes and pushing harsh chemicals, all while completely ignoring the true threat: agricultural bacterial crossovers mutating inside us.
The speaker points out a tragic irony. We have highly effective erysipelas vaccines for pigs in agriculture, but absolutely none for humans. As the theory warns, and I quote, "If they don't turn back to studying mutated erysipelas streptococcus, they will be on the wrong path for a long time." The idea is that a modernized human vaccine could theoretically eradicate these diseases, but the research was just abandoned.
Now, obviously, this theory sits completely outside mainstream medical consensus. But it does leave us with a really provocative question to think about. What if village healers weren't just practicing superstition, but observing real bacterial behaviors? What if modern science humbly re-examined the intertwined histories of animal agriculture and ancient folk healing? It for sure makes you view a simple spell, or even just a piece of undercooked bacon, in a completely different light.